like a barrel.
Barrel tighter?
Tighter? Just like a barrel.
Oh. Daru. Barrel, Daru watches that as well?
Just a taru. Or a balloon.
Balloon? Bald head? Mr. Braun? Possibly? Now, I mean, it's like right there. It's telling us that, yeah, shaped like a barrel, Daru. I mean, close enough, right? And the anime Rynet, that's been like an ongoing thing since the early days of this anime. But then the balloon aspect, Fusen. I've heard Fusen for a long, long time. Luffy. That made me think of a bald head. Mr. Braun, possibly. I mean, everything points at Daru, but you never know. Let's just see. Balloonish. Oh, it is Daru. Oh. And that's why I felt like a definitive goodbye. Wow. That is quite the commitment, man. Yeah, now a totally different perspective, right? Now he understands the definitive nature, the serious nature of her goodbye up on this rooftop. Or her gratitude. Wow. That kind of answers a few of my own questions from the last episode. Yeah, he really is. She is committed. The unbreakable spirit of Suzuha. Oh, that's great. Come on, Daru, let's go. Oh, look at that. Look at this. Aquarius. I'm Aquarius. Mayuri knows, surely. Oh. Yeah, that was on top of the panel as well, right? Right there. Oh, there's more. Oh. Hey. Someone did. Simple enough. No, there's more. Spot on. It's right there. That's Daru's. That's how he names his gadgets. They had a scene dedicated just to this. It's airtight. She must have been thinking about this for such a long time. But the thing is, this is on the same timeline, right?
35年後にまた会おう。君たちにとっては数字
Ah.
すずさん。
鈴葉きっとまた会おうな。僕その時まで頑張るからさ。だから鈴葉も
It's a life-altering thing for Daru, right? Wow. Wow.
頑張れ。
どうしたの岡部。
ダイバージェンスメーターの値が変わっていない。
It's on the same timeline, man. What's happened has happened.
1100を持ってきてから変わるとか。
鈴葉54歳になってるわけっしょ。
来た。
ミスター・ブラウン。手紙。橋田すず。
もしかしてすずさん。
マジでなんでブラウン氏が。昔俺が世話になった。
Oh my god.
今日お前に渡してくれって頼まれてたんだよ。
この人は今どこに。
亡くなったよ。10年前だ。
あなたにとっては数時間前のことかもしれない。今は西暦2000年の6月13日です。
2000 again.
結論だけ書く。失敗した。失敗した。失敗した。失敗した。失敗した。
失敗した。失敗した。失敗した。失敗した。私は失敗した。失敗した。失敗した。失敗した。私が私だということを思い出したのはほんの1年前だった。私はこの24年間
Oh my
記憶を
god.
失っていた。タイムトラベルはうまくいかなかった。修理が完全じゃなかったんだ。でも父さんは悪くない。私が悪いんだ。まっすぐ1975年に飛んでいればよかった。2010年に寄り道すべきじゃなかった。わがままを言ってる場合じゃなかった。私は何のためにこの年まで生きてきたんだろう。使命を忘れてただのうのうと生きてきた。許して許して許して許して、
Oh.
もしも時間を戻せるならあの日の私を引き止めないようにしてほしい。こんな人生
無意味だった。ミスター・ブラウン。
あ？どうした？しけた面しやがって。
古い知り合いです。とても古い。
And so is Mr. Braun, or
彼
was.
女と過ごした時間は今もはっきりと思い出すことができます。
あまり言いたくはないんだがな。自殺だ。自宅で首をつってな。そんなことになる1年ぐらい前から精神的に不安定になってな。
Oh my god, that's her body.
それまでは明るくて優しい人だったんだが。
Oh.
俺のせいだ。俺があの夜鈴葉を引き止めたからタイムマシンは壊れてしまった。
That's the butterfly effect, man. The
あの
consequences.
ディメルさえ送らなければ鈴葉は1975年に旅立てたんだ。
おかりん。
オカリンディメルを送るの。そんなことしたら全部消えちゃうんだよ。すずさんとの思い出も全部なかったことになっちゃうんだよ。
分かってる。
オカリン。
Oh. Perhaps a silver lining.
なんだ岡部。
It did go back up.
橋田鈴か。お前鈴さんと知り合いだったのか。
ええ。
もうかれこれ10年ほどになるかな。あの人には随分世話になった。せめて俺が見とってやりたかったんだが。
自殺ですか。
あ？病気で亡くなったんだよ。あの人の住んでた家は今
Oh.
俺が使ってんだ。
So she's also destined to die, but this time,
この自転車。
yeah, the bike.
それは鈴さんがすっげえ大事に
He has so much respect for her.
捨てらんなくてな。結局10年間置いたままだ。
The way he speaks about her. But I've got a lot of questions about Mr. Braun now.
いわゆるお隣さんだったんだ。縁もゆかりもない俺になんでこんなによくしてくれるんですかと尋ねたことがある。そしたらあの人は笑ってこう答えたよ。巡り巡って人は誰かに助けられて生きている。だから君もいずれ誰かを助けてあげなさい。
He does. He does.
こいつはすずさんの持ち物だった。すずさんは病床でいつもこいつを眺めててな。この数字変わる前なのかな、変わった後なのかな、私は変えられたのかなって最後までなんか気にしてたんだよな。
ダイバージェンスの数値は変わっていた。だが 1% は超えていない。
There is a silver lining there, but my god, man, I'm just devastated right now. Just completely heartbroken. Okay, so the train's running. But it's still not even close to 1% divergence yet, or beyond. Ah. No, yeah. Good guy, Daru.
鈴葉、これで世界は変わったのか。マユリは。
Hold on, Okurin. Hold on, hold on. I do have to apologize for the snot. I really should have like a box of tissues just in case, for these types of moments. Wow. Yeah. That's an incredible episode. That's special. Really special. But like I said, they're as devastating as it is, the revelations of this and how things played out for Suzuha. There's a silver lining for sure, right? Perhaps a roadmap. Okay, so how do you even begin, right? How do you even begin to pick a lane, right? A direction to go into, given the things that are at play in this episode, the things that have happened in this episode. It's exceptional stuff, man. Exceptional stuff. This is just phenomenal stuff. I'm sure I'll be going on many tangents throughout this discussion portion. There's just so much to get to. And, the thing is, I actually had to go back to a couple of episodes just to, kind of make sure some of the information is airtight, right? So I can incorporate it into the discussion aspect of this, right? Stuff like certain divergence numbers, right? Specific numbers at that, right? And I'm glad I did. Because it really lines up, right? And I'm speaking of this silver lining, right? It doesn't even feel right to call it a bittersweet episode, because even though there is this opening, this light at the end of the tunnel, the events that lead up to it are just so devastating. So devastating, they just dismantle you piece by piece. They rip your heart out, man. But again, that's going to have its own section, and my goodness, I'm sure that's going to be a tough one to tackle. But then there's also other things at play here. There's so many things at play here that need to be focused on, right? That demand my attention, right? Because it has given me an opening. And again, not just me, you've got Okurin, right? Though, and again, to be fair, Okurin is going through it, man. He's going through some incredible stuff here, right? This is, again, to hell and back, right? It's constant suffering for Okurin, for Okabe Rintaro. This is his curse as someone who carries or has that ability, that condition of reading Steiner, someone who carries these memories with him at all times. The only one who carries these memories with him at all times. That is his curse. But, before I do end up taking a deep dive into all of this stuff, this stretch of episodes, I'd say episodes 12 to episodes 12 to 16, this is an exceptional stretch of episodes, right? This is surpassing all of my expectations at this point. And, I think I can say at this point, I feel confident in saying this because I feel it. I truly feel it at this point. This is becoming one of my, favorite things of all time at this point, And it's, I consider it a privilege to be able to say that about something. It's this high, incredible high, the highest of highs, this exhilarating feeling as a storytelling enthusiast, right? To feel that about something. I begin to get this really distinct feeling, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this. It's this feeling of butterflies in your stomach, right? It's this feeling of almost being restless, just in the middle of, watching it, right? In the middle of it, you begin to realize, or I begin to realize, oh my God, this is one of my favorite things of all time. I've become so attached to this story, the characters of this story, more specifically, right? The things I felt in this episode, and again, the things I felt leading up to this episode as well, but specifically in this episode, it doesn't happen often. It just doesn't. I've been there plenty of times in my lifetime, as an enjoyer of storytelling, again, as a storytelling enthusiast, someone who has experienced storytelling quite a bit, or quite a bit of it, right, in my lifetime. At certain points, it became an obsession, right? Early days. And then again, it goes through different phases. And that feeling, that moment, right, even in the middle of something, as you watch it, it's just, oh man, it's just, storytelling stardust, right? It is coursing throughout this episode. It really, truly is. And again, it's just not something that happens all that often, right? Everything coming together just perfectly to just scratch that itch, And listen, I'm not even speaking of, technical mastery or, the production side of things and all of that, Sure, objectively, maybe you could say, certain things are better than others, right? There's just some criteria that can dictate that. But, subjectively, there's certain moments, certain things resonate with others, or certain things resonate more for some people than others, right? It's entirely possible that, throughout this stretch of episodes, and then this episode specifically as well, it might not have had that exact effect on others that it had on me, that it is having on me, even now as I, just think about it and I speak on it, right? But I can just tell you my perspective on the matter. This is right up there. It's right up there, man. And then, of course, immediately and effectively, that just makes it essentially a top 2 anime, something that easily even could be my favorite of all time as far as anime goes, right? It could be. It really, truly could be. It's already in the running. And again, just like I said, something that might be your favorite doesn't immediately or effectively have to be something that you think is the absolute best at something, right? I mean, in Steins Gate's case, yes, it's just functioning at such a high level, right, that it can certainly make a case for the best anime that I've watched as well. But again, I've seen quite a bit at this point. I've seen quite a bit of exceptional stuff at this point. So again, just to reiterate, I'm saying this is becoming one of my favorites, right? I'm not outright saying that this is objectively the best. I think you get the gist of my point. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it really can't be how something makes you feel, right? And the things I felt in this episode, and again, the lead up to it as well, it's stuff that just doesn't happen all that often. It just doesn't. And simply put, the things that I experienced in this episode are some of the most heartbreaking things I've experienced in any form of storytelling. I don't say that lightly, man. It's not something I find myself saying all that often. Again, not all that often anymore, at least, right? Because I've experienced quite a bit at this point in my life as far as storytelling is concerned. Again, there's still uncharted territory ahead of me, and just the thought of that is so incredibly exciting, right? Especially as far as anime is concerned as well. There's so much ahead of me, so much. There's so much gaming ahead of me, and again, just books and graphic novels and all kinds of storytelling ahead of me. But there's plenty of it in my past as well, right? And as you saw, it just hit me so hard, man. It just cut so deep to be on cloud nine with these characters, right? To revel in their friendship and moments of connection and happiness, the bonds that are on display, to then experience the things that came next. And it's a totally different type of sadness. You feel sadness, and I feel sadness in plenty of moments in other stories, and again, stories that I've covered on the channel. But this different type of sadness is the type that actually comes with pain. I felt pain, a tightness in my chest. I got choked up, a lump in my throat. I felt that there's this sense of disbelief just sitting there in that chair, just completely devastated at the things that are happening on screen here. The rug is just completely pulled from under my feet. And like I said, it just dismantles me piece by piece, right? It's just like this onslaught, and it's just wave after wave of it. My God, it grabs you by the neck, the scruff of the neck, and it holds you there, man. It holds you there. There's no escape, right? And it doesn't let you off easy. It certainly didn't let me off easy, listen, I know, some might be listening to this thinking, it didn't do all that much for me. And, fair enough. That's fine. But I'm sure there's other things, other experiences of storytelling that you might have had that might have done this for you, right? For me, this is how I felt. Even now, the imagery is just kind of lingering in my mind, right? That's how poignant, how powerful it is, right? And that's by design. And, the thing is, in the last episode's discussion, I think I said something like, Ocarina and the rest have to be kind of careful here, right? That this joy, this happiness, just this moment of pause almost from just the hellish nature of Ocarina's current trajectory. It feels like it's kind of in a bubble, right? And that things could change suddenly. My God, I couldn't think. I simply could not think that it could be something like this, that it could play out like this. I braced myself. I knew it's not going to last, that it is going to be again, difficult stuff to get through soon enough, right? And look at that, right? Really soon in the next episode. But I simply could not fathom that it's going to be something like this. I think I can say that this actually hurts so much more, the Mayuri cycle of death aspect, right? Because, there, I know, there's a thing that is at play here, right? That actively, the story itself is, going towards a solution. And again, there's some really exciting developments at play here as well, in terms of, potentially reaching 1% divergence or going beyond that, right? True freedom and all of that, as Suzuha put all that time ago. But here, like I said, it's a different type of pain, man, a different type of hurt. Just, given Suzuha's life, right? The curse of being a time traveler, the things that she's experienced, the things that she's done to get to this point, and how things played out. Yes, Ocarina kind of cancels out, that choice he made on that night during the thunderstorm, the rainstorm. Oh my God. It ends up being quite a costly choice, right? And the thing is, just in the last episode, I was kind of beginning to think that, okay, I'm kind of out of the woods in terms of the consequences of that. the butterfly effect aspect of that, right? The price to pay because of, the choice he made on that night. But no. Little did I know. Now I really truly get to see the consequences of that. And Okarin gets to see and feel and live with the consequences of that. I mean, the things that have transpired, throughout this episode, tragic, completely tragic. It's cosmic tragedy at play. And, it's the type of thing that can haunt you forever, right? And again, I'm thinking about Okabe. I'm thinking about Okabe Rintaro in this moment, having to carry that with him, for the rest of his life. Yes, like I touched up on, and I'll get into it in more detail in a bit. Yes, he undoes it, right? He kind of cancels it essentially by, and this is another thing I had to go back and really, look at because it just flashed too quickly on the screen. So the D-mail he sends, and the return of D-mails after a long time, right? It's something they didn't really want to dabble in anymore, given again, that notion of not having much control, if any, right, over D-mails, the unpredictability of it all, right? But given the situation, he dabbles. There's no other choice but to dabble. And again, it is a request that is made by Suzuha herself, or Suzu, right? Hashida Suzu. I mean, she took Daru's name, right? More on that in a bit. How all of those things played out and how that came about and everything. Given her, given her amnesia and all of that. But the new D-mail he sent, the one that changed the timeline after a long time, the world line shifting in the opposite direction again, right? Essentially kind of heading up the ladder, climbing back up that rope, if you will. And the specific message of this D-mail is, don't follow last message a certain trap, right? And it did the trick. And again, it kind of sends the divergence number into the opposite direction again. And then, of course, because of that, Suzuha does end up leaving during that rainstorm, during that thunderstorm, or right before it, rather, right? But again, things are perhaps a little bit better. They play out slightly differently, right? Because she still ends up dying. Just this time, it's natural causes, or rather a disease, I believe. Yeah, though she still ultimately ends up dying quite young, right, in the grand scheme of things. So I'm not sure, if they'll specify the nature of the disease, or if it's just going to be left at that. But she does still end up dying quite young. So, young, in the grand scheme of things, at least in comparison to, most people. But of course, this time she's able to dodge the amnesia, right? Because Future Gadget 204 didn't crash this time, and ultimately it crashes because of the damage and unforeseen damage at that that is caused by that thunderstorm, that rainstorm, right? That even Daru could not really understand or get to, right? Because again, it's not something he could even detect, or even Suzuha could detect. So of course, naturally, that means that okay, she proceeds with her mission, and the mission is clear, right? They made it crystal clear. Her mission is to retrieve an IBN 5100 and ultimately get it into Okabe Rintaro's hands, right? So I think it's just best to assume that she did that. She achieved it, right? But again, there's a long story there as well, because at some point, in the whole D-mail fiasco, multiple D-mails and all of that, it goes missing. And again, you can pinpoint the exact moment that happens. It happens after Moeka is foolishly allowed to send a D-mail, right? After that, it's gone. Just gone from the shrine specifically. And once again, this kind of brings me back to this silver lining, right? This potential roadmap that, I do have now, and that, Okabe has as well. But again, he's not quite just there yet in terms of realizing or understanding that this is something. This could be something here. Because at the moment, understandably so, he's only thinking about Mayuri and this shift that seems to have happened, right? He thinks this could be it. He actually believes this maybe could be it. You see, he tears up and he's just thinking to himself, right? Asking himself or asking, Suzuha essentially through internal monologue, is this it? Did things actually work out, right? Now, I don't think he actually believes that they actually reached the beta timeline, the world line, because both him and Maki Sekirisu understand the conditions that have to be met, right? Really unique and rare occurrence at that, right? Moments in time and all of that, right? He knows, right, how exactly you go about making that jump from beta to alpha or alpha to beta. Yet, he still kind of feels in the moment that maybe this is it. Maybe this change, maybe, changing that back and, letting it play out the way it was meant to play out on that night, and Suzuha actually getting to leave, or does leave, right? And again, I do have to keep bringing this in. There is an element of selfishness, right? Ocarina making that choice on that night. There just is. It comes from a good place, of course, like I keep reiterating, but there is a selfish choice made on that night as well, right? And now Ocarina completely understands as well the things that happened because of that choice he made on that night. But now, right, and it feels realistic. At the moment, he's not thinking about all the connotations and all the things that have to be, or the conditions that have to be met, so Mayuri can potentially live. Right now, things have changed, right? The bomb threat hasn't been called in. The trains are running. And after he makes it back home in a panic state, he sees that Mayuri is fine, right? She's just taking a nap. So for the moment, you can understand, why exactly Ocarina must feel or might feel that, oh my God, this is it. It happened. Mayuri might be saved now. And again, from Ocarina's perspective, emotionally, if you put yourself in his headspace, you can see, why exactly this might feel like a breakthrough for him, right? Because he's been there, man. He's been through it, right? The hellish cycle that he put himself through, because he simply told himself there's no other option but to just run this back over and over. And then, of course, ultimately, he brings Maki Sekirisu in on it, though she had to step in as well. But my thoughts on this at this moment in time are that, okay, this might have something to do with the fact that, yes, they've Ocarina has shifted into a different timeline, a different world line, right? And he's kind of gone back in the other direction now. So, since there's a shift there is a change there, it could make sense that there is a change in the Mayuri situation as well. But ultimately, I think it's not a definitive change, in the sense that I don't think it's going to, bypass Mayuri's death, right? Because again, it's not even close to 1% divergence. So ultimately, I think it might still end up happening, Mayuri's death. But, since it shifted, right, the timeline, it might end up happening, or it might just play out slightly different, right? So that's kind of my, stance at the moment. I don't think, they've bypassed it, right? This just feels like the beginning stages of it, right? But again, there's light at the end of the tunnel, again, potential roadmap. Because now that I've seen how things play out after you try to cancel a D-mail, right, and let things play out how they should have played out, or did play out originally, the divergence number does go in the opposite direction, right? And that's the thing I spoke of earlier. I had to go back. I just, I knew I should check. I should check the last number. And it's essentially spot on. The first three numbers are spot on. 0.409 was the last number, right? The last divergence number before this D-mail, right, that he sent. Oh, chase, ignore assist and go after Mane Suzuha, right? But now that it's been essentially kind of canceled, right, through another D-mail, right? Even that it's a bit of a tricky concept, right? If you try to look ahead a bit in terms of, this being a potential roadmap. Because, the first D-mail happened. That happened. You can't undo it, technically, right? That's always there. But, the solution to that appears to be another D-mail, on top of that, right? This time, and you see it on display. Don't follow Suzuha. Last message is a certain trap. So essentially, those D-mails kind of arrived in quick succession, right? And since it has played out like this, yes, that Okarin did not pursue Suzuha, but right there is also a potential speed bump, right? It's all up to the person getting a follow-up D-mail, right? I think I even kind of raised this point episodes ago at this point, back around the time Ruka is hoping to send a D-mail, right? And I think I spoke of how, it all kind of, it's blind faith, right? It all kind of depends on how her mom even kind of, proceeds after getting such a random message, right, on her pager. But again, it's not even just the contents of the message itself, just the fact that message happened. Again, that could trigger the butterfly effect anyways. So yeah, this notion, this idea that's being presented here, that a follow-up D-mail did cancel the directive or the instructions of the initial D-mail, that still kind of falls on the person receiving that follow-up D-mail, potential follow-up D-mail, right? So that's still a thing, that's still a potential speed bump. But let's look at this roadmap that I keep going on and on about, now that I've seen things at play and how it can turn the clock back, essentially, right? Turn the meter back. And again, 0.409 is the exact number that I had before Okarin sent this. 0.409 was the new number after Ferris's D-mail, right? And that, of course, that D-mail just changed the identity, the landscape of their town. So that was quite a substantial D-mail, right? Again, I don't even know the specifics of it. Okarin doesn't know the specifics of it, right? No one knows the specifics of that specific D-mail, right? Because Ferris did not want to share the D-mail itself, the contents of the D-mail itself, right? Yet ultimately, I do still believe it is specific to her father being back in her life. So it's kind of crazy that almost immediately, if you are to pursue this, right? This potential climb up the ladder, this roadmap, the next one in line is a really, really difficult one. Like, how do you even begin to approach it? Because you simply don't even know the contents of that D-mail, the instructions of that D-mail, right? So that right there is a massive, massive roadblock already, right? If you do begin to go into that direction. So yeah, almost immediately I am thinking about the difficult nature of this potential undertaking. Just how achievable is this, right? Because again, next in line, if you go through the list, if you go back in the opposite direction, is Ferris's D-mail, right? I am at the divergence meter number that is showcased after Ferris sent that D-mail, right? So yeah, it's already not an easy looking task if Okarin latches onto this train of thought as well. But, ultimately, if it is doable, if it is achievable, if he could somehow, have a follow-up D-mail that does stop that D-mail from going out, Ferris's D-mail from going out, the number should shift back again, right? In theory, based on the things I've seen in this episode. And even if that works, it's not as if it gets any easier, does it? Because then you've got, so many other challenging D-mails that have been sent, right? You've got Moika's D-mail, of course. How the hell do you even begin to approach that? It's Moika. It's not even someone they have any contact with, right? In that capacity anymore, given the revelations of who Moika really truly is. The thing is, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Ferris has not been featured since. It's rather puzzling that she kind of has been kept out of the story or out of the limelight since then. But yeah, maybe this provides the perfect chance to bring her back in, right? As that D-mail is next in line. Going back to my initial point, you've got D-mails from Moika, right? An integral D-mail at that, right? Because that's a crucial before and after. Because after her D-mail, There's no more IBN 5100. Then, of course, you've got the Ruka D-mail. You've got the lotto numbers D-mail. That's quite a significant one, or it felt like quite a significant one, a memorable one, because it's the first time since the initial D-mail, right? Someone said Makise Kurisu, that I finally kind of get to see him shift into another timeline. I finally kind of get a confirmation that, okay. Because yes, they do send D-mails, but none of them ended up being substantial enough as the lotto numbers D-mail to actually shift into a different world line. And then, of course, like I just mentioned, the Makise Kurisu D-mail, right? Someone stabbed Makise Kurisu D-mail. That one is as significant as it comes because that is the one that switches from the alpha to, the opposite, right? From the beta to alpha, the one they're in right now, right? And that happens around the significant moments in time, right? And the invention of the time machine. And again, that's the first D-mail being sent essentially and landing on CERN's radar. And of course, this time Ocarine receives the meter itself from Mr. Braun, right? He had a few questions for Ocarine, right? About just the nature of this thing and, just the meaning of these numbers. But, ultimately Ocarine does notice that the numbers have changed, right? So at least it has registered. But it's a little bit interesting, isn't it? That, she didn't actually get that back to Okabe. Ultimately it is back in his hands, right? But I'm just surprised it wasn't just, in a package alongside the letter itself as well. But again, I kind of have to think about the things that happen, the chain of events that happened that led to that point of, them being that open, or, Suzuha being really quite open about herself and who she really is, and, actually handing over the meter to Okabe Rintaro, right? Because she knew about Okabe Rintaro's thing, his ability, his condition, the reading Steiner. And like I said, this answered a few of my own questions. How does she know the name? Is it this open thing that everyone in the resistance knew? Ultimately, it's because Daru, Beryl Teeter, knew about reading Steiner as well. And it's essentially through, it's essentially through her father, right? Daru, that she learns about this in the future as well. Again, not directly, but again, through documents, through maybe stuff that was included in the will. But then, of course, here in this timeline, those things did not happen. Everything that happened after he stopped Suzuha from leaving never happened. Never happened. So, yeah, it's a tough thing to stomach, right? It's a tough feeling to stomach. You see Mayuri right before Ocarina ends up sending that D-mail. She understood the connotations of this, and Ocarine most definitely understands. Yet he had to push through. But yeah, it's just, it's a sad thought to just think about all those moments, right? Significant moments, the bonding and all of that, the happiness, her actually finally getting to meet her dad, Daru getting to find out that this is his daughter. Nope, didn't happen. Did not happen. So, this kind of goes back to that whole pros and cons aspect of it, right? Her ending up staying allowed for a few things, things such as that, incredible moments, the send-off, such a hopeful send-off as well, right? Cloud 9, like I said. But none of that happened. None of that happened here. So yeah, if it wasn't clear before, it is most definitely clear at this point. These are not just, small choices, hypotheticals. These are life-altering moments that are just disappearing, right? Daru finding out that this is his daughter is just a life-altering thing. Like I said, you see just how much of an impact it had on Daru, right? Learning this, finding out about this, and then just like that, a couple of hours later, finding out that this daughter that he just learned about and only got to really spend a minimal amount of time, with in that capacity is already just dead, right? Just given the unique nature of their existence, her time traveling back to 1975 and just having to meet up, essentially, the long way, just aging. Though, of course, there's no meetup at all. These are significant moments in people's lives, and these are not just any people, these are his close friends, his family, essentially, right? And like I alluded to this earlier, this is the curse of Okabe Rintaro as well, right? The curse of reading Steiner. And, once again, the curse of time travel as well, in his really unique case as well, cursed to carry such poignant and potent moments with him, such significant, life-altering moments with him, right? That's the burden that Okabe Rintaro carries. That's the burden of reading Steiner. He carries all of this with him at all times. And I think more so than ever before, Okabe Rintaro is truly going to feel. He is truly going to feel just how jarring all of this is, just how devastating all of this is, because now, because of the shift, so much of that is gone, so much of those moments. And he's going to see these people and be around them, and he'll see that, they just truly do not remember any of that. And that simply has to do a number on you. It does. And yes, even though he understands that, as he, yells out to Mayuri, knowing is one thing, but actually, being in their presence and understanding that, this just feels like a completely different thing altogether now, right? That's got to eat away at you, right? Once you actually live it. And Okabe is going to live it, right? Now that he is, again, in a different timeline, right? In an earlier timeline that he's been through already. But there's also that notion of, okay, I understand, but ultimately, it is for Mayuri's sake. It is to save Mayuri. That's the one thing that matters most to him, right? He's gotta save Mayuri, right? And then again, earlier I said that it's also a request that Suzuha made in the letter. If you can turn it back, please don't stop me on that night, right? So he's got that aspect of it as well, just doing something to give Suzuha a chance, a bit of a different trajectory, right? In comparison to the one that I get in the letter, that they get to go through in the letter. That letter carries such emotional heft and pain. It's just this, I don't know, it's personified. That letter, the way it's personified in the depiction of it, in the delivery of it, it's just masterful stuff, right? It cuts so deep, man. It cuts so deep. And again, the techniques at play, be it the editing choices, the original score, right? How it's incorporated and edited in. And then, of course, you simply cannot forget the voice acting for Suzuha. It is one of the standout moments of the entire anime. Just the voice acting itself, right? It's just this raw depiction of despair, right? Sudden despair at that. As if a tsunami has just hit you. You feel, I felt the heft of that, the notion, the soul-crushing notion that she squandered her life, wasted it. This is her reading of it. This is her feeling of it. That's how she felt in those moments. And it's absolutely crushing to just know that Suzuha felt like that she truly felt that everything is on her, that she's doomed everyone to this dystopia because of her inaction. At the end of the day, it's not even in her hands. It was out of her hands. It's a freak accident that happened because, again, there's unforeseen issues, within the time machine that simply could not be fixed, because it simply could not be, I don't know, even, caught. Even then, she puts all the blame on herself. Please, tell dad that it wasn't his mistake. It wasn't his fault. It's my own fault for being selfish, for, wanting to see my father. How about that, eh? Just the notion of that it's a selfish thing to, want to see your father, right? And now, again, I have an answer to another question. I asked, how come she can't just go get the IBN 5100 and then come back to 2010? And of course, it makes complete sense here. She could only do that in that order, right? She couldn't go to 75 directly because she's not going to get to come back, right? Because this iteration of the time machine of FG204, it only goes in one direction, backwards in time, right? And this kind of, almost immediately makes you think about the internal components, reminding Daru of the D-mail phenomenon, or, the phone microwave that allows the D-mail phenomenon, right? That it's kind of really quite similar. So yeah, in this case, backwards in time. But again, like I said, this iteration of the time machine, because again, I do believe there is another iteration of the time machine that's been present since day one, since episode 1, the rooftop, right? I firmly believe that carried 2 people in. Amani Suzaha, who I see on the rooftop. So, right there, I already kind of know that I am going to see Amani Suzaha at some point, right? Again. But it's just not the same, man. It's not. It's just not going to be the same, is it? Right? Everything that happened here just feels so definitive, so raw, and heartbreaking and devastating that, even if I do see her again, and again, good chance, high likelihood that I am going to see her again, it's not going to feel quite the same, is it? Because it's not going to be quite that Suzaha that got to experience these things and then had that send-off, that hopeful send-off, right? Back to the 70s to then experience that hell that she goes through, right? Upon regaining her memories. But yeah, long story short, clearly there is another iteration, one that can carry more than one person. And it kind of just checks out as well, right? Because just like how the time leap felt like the natural progression of the D-mail, right? You can kind of use that logic and see how, there might be a progression, another iteration of the time machine, right? How it might come about, that they try to improve on it. But yeah, a reprieve from the heartbreak, from the tension, from the hellish cycle that Ocarina is kind of trapped in, to then just trampling on your heart tenfold, right? It's textbook, and it's damn effective. And once again, all of this is so damn effective and devastating and hits so hard, right? Because of the excellent first half of this anime. Just the required first half of this anime. It's foundational stuff. It simply is. Because of the time, the extensive time I got to spend with these characters, right? I experienced them getting fleshed out, right? Again, excellently. And given that time, a proper amount of time at that, I got to watch and experience the group dynamics, the bonds that are developed, right? As the lab grows, member by member, the unique relationships within the group dynamic as well, the pairs, and how, each person has a different type of relationship with Ocarina. And then even beyond that, there's other pairs as well, be it, Kurisu and Mayuri, right? Another really unique bond, bond as well, but, another really unique pair. And, I spoke of this being a life-altering moment for Daru, right? How could it not? Finding out that this is your daughter, man. And, I think I touched upon it a bit in the last episode as well, right? But that was before the official confirmation. But it really is such an interesting influence for Daru, right? Having or learning that he does become a father, right? First of all. And then beyond that, his kid is really, really damn impressive, right? And this is someone that actually looked up to him, right? Looked up to, the person that Daru becomes. But, listen, let me immediately kind of backtrack. She's impressed by Daru, her father, right now as well, right? And this is even before she actually gets confirmation that Daru is her father. You see that she's really impressed with Daru. She even tells him, you should be happier. You just fixed a time machine, right? But again, Daru's, he's also thinking about the one-way trip to the 70s, right? He's got concern for her. So yeah, even now she does respect him and his efforts, right? And the things that he's capable of. She really, really, changed her opinion on him. But then, there's also that element of, okay, this is someone that really looks up to me, to the person I do become, the things I do put into motion, the things I stand for, right? So, that's that's also the influence I'm speaking of here. That is going to shape Daru's trajectory as well, in terms of the person he is going to become and wants to become from this point on, right? But again, that's not a thing anymore, is it? Because he doesn't get to find out about Suzaha being his daughter, and Suzaha doesn't get to find out about Daru being her father. Maybe down the line, something might happen. Maybe there could be a full circle moment, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want to be too hopeful on that or about that. And again, the moment itself, after Mayuri really spells it out for them, and again, it's airtight. From an audience member perspective, it's not a shocker. It's not a surprise at all. I think that's probably the case for most other people as well. I'd be really surprised to hear if anyone's just completely, bamboozled by this. But again, there might be some people. But there's just far too much. There's just far too much to the point that it becomes really clear that Daru is the dad, right? I mean, there was an opening, I kind of latched onto maybe a different, possibility, Mr. Braun, the balloon description and all. I immediately thought of, a bald head, Mr. Braun's bald head. But no, that didn't end up being the case. They meant, balloon as in just the size, kind of shaped like a barrel, like a balloon, big lad. Daru's a big boy. But yeah, I think the actual scene itself, them actually addressing each other, I thought is beautifully handled, beautifully executed. Yes, there's a moment of Daru injected into the moment as well. Ultimately, it is quite a significant, quite a tense situation as well. Right, so it just kind of came out. But I just simply love that Suzaha got that moment. She's not had an easy life, not at all. Right, so her time, the time that she spent, making friends with these people, becoming friends with these people and having those moments. I loved all of that so much for Suzaha. These are the best times of her life that she had, right? Because all she's known is a dystopian future, always being on the run, always, again, from minute to minute, just on the move. Otherwise, you're going to be hunted down. So yeah, I really, really, really love that she got that moment. These things that she's been carrying in her mind, things that have been on her mind, how she would, possibly address her father if she is to come across him. Her just actually getting to voice it all and just get it out there. It's just a beautiful thing. And I think, Daru actually handled it quite well as well, again, given the circumstances of the information that's being, presented to him. And again, given the time travel narrative aspect of it, the future is most definitely affecting the past and the present, right? A lot, like I said in the last episode, there's a lot of bootstraps being set up or possibilities of that being set up here. But yeah, to have all of that newfound perspective, again, life altering. I know I keep saying it, but it simply has to be, right? For someone like Daru to then just hours later lose all of that, have it all snuffed out. That is, that's a tough pill to swallow. And that's putting it lightly. And you see, Daru doesn't say much because how can he, right? He's devastated. But you see it in those pauses, those shots that linger on Daru's face, be it, the shot of his glasses. You can't see through to his eyes. Just even that one frame of him upon hearing those, words, she died. It's a shock for all of us, right? But that one shot of Daru, the expression on his face is just, it's devastating just to look at Daru in that state. And then, of course, you see how much it affected all of them. Later on, there's that one shot of them just back at the lab. No one knows how to even, proceed from this point on, or how to even begin to, talk about anything. They're just sitting there, dead silent. Just, yeah. There's that one shot of Mayuri, head in her hands on the table. Everyone's just completely bamboozled and devastated at that point. And of course they are, right? Because of this drastic tonal shift that happens. Again, it's not really a tonal shift for them, within the context of the story, but for me, it's quite the drastic tonal shift. But for them, it's quite the gut punch, right? That, again, that's just putting it lightly, because they're just completely expecting her to show up at the door. Yes, it might be a little bit a little bit jarring, a little bit bizarre to, have an older Suzuha show up at the door, but it's still Suzuha. It's still Suzuha, and they're excited about it. They're joking about great-grandchildren and all of that. To then, Mr. Braun showing up and delivering that, news. And, the thing is, leading up to it, I had cause for concern as well, given that, I knew this is on the same timeline, right? So, it's a different type of time travel mechanic at play, right? What's happened has happened. Mr. Braun had that letter on him the whole time for years. So my understanding is that all of that is just accounted for, right? The divergence number specifically, it's taken all of that into account, right? That's why it didn't change, because everything that's happened has happened. And yeah, you see Okarin's quite concerned about that as well. But yeah, man, just the thought of it, just knowing that Suzuha spent a year agonizing and suffering through immense guilt, insurmountable guilt, right? Yeah. Just that panic-induced trauma that must have washed over her after realizing, right? And then the grief, my goodness, the grief, just tormenting her every second of her life from that point on, right? And then probably haunting her dreams as well. And yeah, you can completely understand how exactly she got to that point of being mentally unstable in the final year, right? And just knowing that, just the thought of that, it just crushes you even more, doesn't it? Just the psychological and emotional turmoil of remembering your shortcomings. Again, from her perspective, it's shortcomings, right? There's that moment that you could just, you can understand that she felt sorry and embarrassed that she had it easy. She felt that, she was embarrassed that, she was able to live that life, an easy life. Right. And, at one point she even questions, why am I even alive anymore? I mean, the whole, I failed sequence, the letter sequence itself, it's a masterful scene. It really is. The editing choices on display here and everything else just coming together to deliver this, right? A moment that's always going to be attached to Steins Gate as perhaps the moment, the episode. Yes, I've got quite a bit still ahead of me, but, I feel like something tells me this is not going to be something that's about to be just forgotten or overtaken by something, just that switch up, from Okarin reading the letter to transitioning Amane Suzuha's voice, transitioning in that voice, effectively putting us in her headspace, right? As she writes that letter, as those tears drop onto the letter, as she scribbles that line, or she just could not bear it anymore. And you see that long line, that streak, right at the end. And her state of mind is reflected in that letter as well, And it's not just for me, but for them as well. The repeating of that phrase, I failed. I mean, for a moment, I'm just kind of frozen. I'm baffled. And then it begins to hit you, right? As it just keeps going on and on and on. I failed. Again, reflected in the voice acting, right? And the tone itself. And the fact that, again, in that state, in again, unstable state, according to Mr. Braun as well, right? In the final year, she wrote that letter in that state. I think more so than anyone else in this cast of characters, this incredible ensemble cast, Amane Suzuha being broken to that point just hits... it hits so different. It just cuts so deep, right? Given, the mental fortitude of this exceptional young person, right? It's been so impressive to watch her, being this, time traveler and everything that comes, the baggage that comes with being a time traveler. Like I keep saying, the curse of being a time traveler, but, she's been so strong throughout, right? She's been so resolute, so dialed in to the mission at hand. To then, to be hit, with this letter and the things that happened to her, it's not something easy to sit through, it's just not. I mean, just to see and to learn that, Suzuha felt that her life's purpose just kind of meant nothing, right? That her life meant nothing, that she ultimately wasted her life and her efforts because they led to nothing because she simply could not. She ran out of time. Right? It was far too late by the time she actually came to, right? But the crazy thing is, a part of me actually kind of, it might be a little bit morbid, but a part of me actually part of me actually kind of is happy that she got to live that life, without the knowledge of all of that stuff. Yes, I know, once it came about, once she remembered, it led to her eventual death. And then, of course, on top of that, the evocative, devastating imagery that they use, right? For Suzuha in that, in that letter, or during that letter scene, I failed scene. I mean, the most haunting moment of it all is the moment I clocked that shadow that's swinging is her body, and then you see Mr. Braun's immediate reaction as well. It's a close-up of his eyes, but yeah, oh my god, I couldn't even imagine, I couldn't even fathom that I'd have these images in my mind, around the time I started this episode. Just the thought of Amane Suzuha hanging herself and her body being discovered, in that manner. I mean, listen, the shot itself is, it's a difficult shot, it's an evocative shot. A difficult shot to look at, but it's a striking image, man. It's a type of image that I know I'll never forget. I'll never forget that moment. I'm not saying I'm attaching that moment to Amane Suzuha, but it'll be difficult not to remember that moment. Anytime just the mention of Suzuha, anytime Amane Suzuha comes up. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, some of these images and these moments presented in the letter scene, these are some of the most defining moments or definitive moments for this character, right? They are attached to this character. But that being said, something really beautiful kind of came out of this episode as well. A different dynamic, a different relationship that is at play, or was at play. Mr. Braun and Suzuha, or Hashida Suzu, right? He didn't know her as Suzuha, but that dynamic. I don't know, man. I really, really just enjoyed that, just learning about that, and just how much of an impact Suzuha actually had on Braun's life as well, Mr. Braun's life as well, his trajectory, right? Lasting impact of that. And, I loved, and I pointed this out, I loved how he spoke of her. He had such fondness for her and respect, right? Reverence, essentially. Someone that truly left a mark on his life, right? To this day. There's those moments later on as it's just him and Okarin back at the house that he lives in now, her house. So yeah, it's yet another really interesting relationship at play, through these time travel dynamics. Now, of course, our Suzuha that goes back in time knows that this is Mr. Braun, the Mr. Braun that she ends up, working for, the one that hires him, right? And, again, full circle moment, right? It plays out beautifully. He helps others. He helps out a young person in need, right? And also he lets, Okabe rent out the room upstairs as well, right? And as far as I remember, he doesn't charge him all that much, right? But yeah, again, bringing in the time travel aspect of it, there's an interesting angle to look at here as well, Mr. Braun. Now then, they even actually showed us a scene of Suzuha back in the 70s, right? She looked the same, right? So you have to assume it's close to around the time she arrived, right? Maybe, a few months, give or take, maybe a year at most, but she looks the same. And she's got the same bike. Surely Mr. Braun must have remembered that face and that bike as well, right? Is there a possibility here that, Mr. Braun is kind of holding things back from Okarin at that point in time as they, go back to that place and he, shows her or him around, right? And brings out the meter and everything, and just how exactly they met and how, she was so kind to him, to a stranger at that, just a neighbor, right? But a stranger still. Yeah, I think there is something there. I think there is a possibility there that Mr. Braun is holding information back from Okabe. I mean, the point I'm trying to make here is all those years later, it's not as if he's all that old. Surely, the moment Amane Suzuha came to him, for a job, he must have clocked it. Or at the least, it would have felt a little bit strange to him that, oh, hold on. why does this young person look just like Hashira Suzu, right? Surely. I mean, again, he's not that old. Maybe 40s, early 40s, 45, but I don't think he's in his 50s or anything. He even points out just how much Suzu-san really enjoyed that bike of hers, right? And again, here in the present timeline, he knows about Suzuha and her bike, right? And I guess I can just assume that he gives Suzuha a place to stay at as well, right? Surely she's not actually going back to the time machine every night, right? I mean, it could be a possibility, but I just kind of assumed he gave young Suzuha a place to live at. So yeah, Mr. Braun steps into the narrative proper, right? He's always been around, he's always been a factor, but he's always kind of been in the background, right? And he's always been a factor because of just the location and the building, the repair shop. But yeah, I love that, now his purpose in the narrative is being explored. And it's great to see the bonds that he formed as well, right? Like Ocarina said, man, don't judge a book by its cover. There's much more to Mr. Braun, isn't there? But yeah, man, I'd say that as a whole, once again, it strikes the perfect balance of plot, progression, and emotionally resonant material, right? It's just perfect. Perfect. But yeah, man, as I'm, signing off, as an audience member, the knowledge of these moments, or the knowledge of these moments not, being in play anymore, it just hurts so much, man, so much. It's just tragic. And, ultimately, that might even be the real tragedy of it all, right? At this moment, I'm thinking of, that incredible moment of cinema, in my opinion and many other people's opinions. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. And our protagonist, Okabe Rintaro, carries all of that with him, for better or for worse. All of those memories. And that is the curse of reading Steiner. And I really love how it strikes a balance there as well. This ability or this condition, him being this outlier. And that's putting it lightly, the ability to maintain your memories across timelines, world lines, right? Being immune to the memory reconstruction aspect of it. It's quite a thing, right? Still no explanation for it. But, even if there's that notion of it potentially just being this OP thing that just exists because he's, the protagonist, there's also this aspect of it, right? The curse of reading Steiner. But yeah, folks, I think that should do it for this one. Thank you so much for joining me for this phenomenal episode. Just full of incredible directing choices. Something that's a bit of a constant for this anime, of course. Just full of incredible moments. Just incredibly happy moments, or just devastating moments, but incredible nonetheless. Even just simple things like Daru immediately kind of taking up the role of a dad, imploring her as she's departing, to stay strong, that he'll be staying strong as well, that they'll meet again, right? At that moment, he's thinking like a father, already beginning to think like a father, that she is going to be lonely, perhaps for a time, in a foreign time, right? The 70s, much like how even the peaceful times of the 2010s are quite foreign to her at first. And, she said it herself, quite scary as well. Incredible stuff. One of the strongest episodes of the anime, if not the strongest episode, right? This could be the best. I'd be really quite surprised if there's too many episodes better than this one. But yeah, let's leave that for later. Let's see how some of these other episodes in the future play out. But for now, this right here is an all-timer. Incredible episode, phenomenal episode. It puts you through it. And ultimately, the feelings it brought out in me and the way it made me feel. And like I said, I can't claim that happens all that often, these days at least. So, once it does, it's a special moment. It's a special feeling. It really is. But yeah, folks, again, before I sign off, it is the type of episode that I could come back to. I could totally come back to this. There might be other things I might have to add to this, as the episodes go on. But yeah, for now, if you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments. Give me your thoughts. If you're interested in timer-based full length or full opacity, no opacity mask, clear footage, crystal clear footage, and again, early access to the next few episodes right now, consider checking out the Patreon page. The links are in the description and the pinned comment. Also links to social media. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for episode 17. Until then, take it easy.